All right, welcome back, Megan Stewart. We're so happy for part 2. And this one, first let me say, if you have not listened to part 1, go back and listen to part 1 where Megan, I learned a lot about AAC that I never knew. So go back and listen to that one. And this one, we're going to be talking about AAC and literacy. So welcome back, Megan.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah. So when I first met you, I was talking with you and it was like AAC and literacy. I felt like these two areas that were, for me at least, I didn't really feel like I had a good base for either of them in school and never really pursued work with them. So I thought that was fascinating. And the fact that you combine them and work with them together, I think is just where the circle's getting smaller and smaller to where you may only have like a couple other people in this circle with you. I don't know.
Yeah, there's not a lot of us, although it is growing, because this comprehensive literacy for all movement has definitely taken its wings over the last, I would say, 2 years. And there's definitely a lot more of us out there working on it, especially with our complex communication needs kids.
Yeah. And I think it's a group that would be easy to not include in that and to feel like, oh, well, we'll just get them using devices, get some form of communication, but there's so much more to that. So before we dive into that, I would love to just know what led to this love. And for those, this will be in our show notes too, but this is how much you love literacy, is that your website is actual sensible literacy. So it is obviously a big love for you. How did you, and AAC, if you listen to the first, this was in your blood from the beginning. Megan was, that was meant to do AAC. How did you begin to incorporate literacy into that?
I've always loved reading. As on a personal level, I've been a book nerd since I could read. I read all the time. I read constantly. And I've always loved using books in therapy with students, always. Whether I was initially working with students that were working on artic or they were working on language, I always somehow just pulled a book in, and we would always have a book that we were reading or looking at the pictures or something. And so when I started really focusing in on students who were complex communicators or that needed AAC, I thought, well, that doesn't have to change. They can still look at books and, I can read books to them and we can still talk about the pictures. That doesn't have to change. So it's always just been an easy thing for me, just because of my love of kids' books. And I'm always looking at them and I'm always popping into bookshops and I'm always thinking about that. And so I've always just loved literacy and loved books. And now that there's even more research coming out and more information coming out about how important it is to really make that a focus when you're working with kids that have complex communication needs, that just relit a fire in me that that's just really my mission, is to make sure that everyone knows that everyone needs access to literacy. Doesn't matter how you communicate. It doesn't matter what you may look like, how you talk, anything like that. Everybody needs access to literacy.
Yeah. And that's a great reminder, because I think it is so easy to think, well, if they can't read, if they can't comprehend it, but that's just but a piece of what you can do with books and literacy. So
exactly.
That's such a good reminder. Now, just as a quick refresher, because again, I don't have a great background in literacy. I don't even know if it was back in my day, if it was even really touched upon that much in grad school. So how do SLPs and literacy just overall go together so well? As a reminder for myself included?
Well, there's so much language involved in literacy, right? So you're not only reading, you're talking about the pictures and having to make inferences, and you're doing all sorts. There's so much literacy, and AAC and language are just completely intertwined all the time. You've got to be able to recognize letters and know that they make certain sounds, and that a group of letters makes a word and a group of words spaced out makes a sentence. So there's endless opportunities there with with literacy and combining that as a language piece. It is touched upon outside of language therapy. Obviously, it's a very core part of all schools' curriculums, but I think SLPs bring an extra little added bonus with our expertise and our knowledge in language and language development and how to really specify and teach that and really reinforce those skills in all students.
Yeah. And what you just said is I think important for us all to remember. It is just reminds us how important literacy and how much you can use it for letter identification from our little guys up to inferences and just vocabulary. And it's really, there's no end to where you can start and where you can end utilizing literacy.
And spelling and writing and all of that is all very much entwined in that language piece.
Yeah. And it sounds like you alluded to that this wasn't an area. Literacy wasn't traditionally worked with students with AAC, but now you're noticing a shift. What do you think is the reason behind that shift?
I don't know what it is as much as who it is. Dr. Karen Erickson has always been a champion for students with communication needs, and Dr. David Copenhaver, actually their book, I was going to share it with everyone as well. This book, if you are interested in it at all, is like, I can't even tell you how many pages are highlighted up like crazy in this book. So it's comprehensive literacy for all, but they have really pushed this forward. I mean, they're not the only ones definitely that have started it, but with the release of this book, it has pushed it to the forefront. And you're right, it was not anything that was talked about when I was in school. And a lot of things that were even alluded to when I was in school and they talked about literacy, the mindset has completely, and the research, not even just the mindset, but the research has shown us that that was not the right way. That wasn't helping. That was actually hurting and hindering, not hurting. Hurting is a bad word, but hindering. So it's definitely been an evolution and it continues to be an evolution. And like we were talking about in the previous AAC episode, it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of not waiting for it to be perfect and just diving in and doing it and learning as you go.
Yeah, it's because, again, I think by waiting for it to be perfect, we waste that valuable time that could have been utilized. Yeah, I love that you point out that book. That sounds like a great resource. And we can also include that in the show notes too, if that would help.
Absolutely.
But anytime resources, we SLPs, we love get our hands on material and resources.
Yes.
And I love that it's now becoming more of a focus, because you're right. It's like when you know better, you do better. And we all have those students or people that we've worked with in the past that we think, oh, I just need to apologize to them because now I know more and I wish I could do differently. So we're all there. But when you're incorporating literacy, what does it initially look like? Do you target it during the assessment phase? Is it more of an intervention? How do you incorporate it?
It just flows. I don't do assessments, but it flows into just my typical therapy.
Okay.
So my typical therapy as an SLP that focuses on AAC, and just because of my love of literacy, I grab a core board or an AC device or both and a book and maybe a sensory bin or something that we're going to do that incorporates sensory materials with the students afterwards as an extension activity, and I go into a classroom. And I just go in and we read the book. And when I say read, sometimes we read all the words. Sometimes we're just doing a picture walk and we're just looking at the pictures and talking and commenting about what we see and what we think about it. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Is it funny? Is it goofy? That kind of a thing. And then I will read the same book with my students multiple times. Like I've done it for a good month before, and then we just change out maybe the follow-up extension activity that we're doing, or we read it for a different purpose, or we write afterwards. So I think for me, just because I'm comfortable with books, it's very easy for me to just pick up a book and go. But a lot of the things that I did when I was initially starting was I'd pick out a book. Again, it doesn't matter what book. If you as the professional are excited about the book, you should probably go with that book because that excitement is going to carry out and shine through regardless of what the book is. But if you don't like the book, the kids are going to know that and they're not going to be interested. But something that I've done, and this may be jumping ahead, so if it is, I apologize. But when I look at the book, I will go through and I'll have a stack of Post-it notes and a pen, and I'll just look at the pictures and read the text and think about a core word or two that I could model that go off of that page. And then I put the sticky note on the page of the book so that while I'm reading and I'm reading the book, I don't have to be thinking. So I'm freeing up some of that brain space, right? So then I've got that sticky note there. So if I'm in the moment and I'm overwhelmed or something has thrown me off, then I can look at my sticky note and go, oh, this is what I need to do. And it's also a good reminder for any other staff that you're working with that these are the words that we're going to be focusing on this page or throughout the reading of this book. So that's how I make it a little bit easier for myself, free up a little bit of that brain space so I can go in and read with my students.
I am a huge fan of anything that frees up brain space.
Right.
Because you're right. You think to yourself, well, I love that you're planning ahead, but then you're in the moment. It is easy if you get distracted or this happens, but it just keeps you on target. But it also creates that consistency that, also each time, what are you going to be practicing? You're using the same book, but you can also focus on some of those same words until they really understand it and have a good grasp of it.
Exactly. So it's in this book, the Comprehensive Literacy for All book, and a lot of the research, they call it repetition with variety. So you're repeating some of it, but you're also providing that variety piece. So it's not like you're doing the exact same thing over and over again. But our students get bored. We get bored faster than our students do with a certain book. If you think about just kids growing up, I can't even tell you when my 3 boys were little, I probably still can repeat Goodnight Moon word for word because we read it every single night and they weren't bored with it, but I sure was. So just continuing to keep that in mind as well, that as long as you keep it new and fresh and you do something a little bit different, that repetition is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing for our students. Yeah.
And I try to explain this to parents too, that just to your point, we feel like, oh, I couldn't watch that every day. Unless Shawshank Redemption, I can watch that every day. But kids, they love the predictability. They love to know, oh, I know what's going to happen next. And so it's so important. So I think that is, again, just a great reminder that even though we might feel like, oh, I can't do this again, if they're still motivated. Now, do you ever draw on if, let's say, they have a love of trains or something, an animal? Do you try to incorporate books that bring in that love as well?
Absolutely. Just like with any therapy or AAC therapy, especially when you're working with those emergent communicators, you want to pull on their interests. So if they're the younger kids or even the older kids, if they love trains or if they're really into space or what have you, I mean, you could easily go to your library and search trains and space and get all sorts of books that are at different age levels and different things, and find all sorts of things, because that's, again, just going to bring in their interest and bring in their want to communicate with you about it, and make them more interested in engaging with you for sure.
We'll be right back to our interview. Take a moment to stretch your legs, but don't go anywhere because we want to talk to you about our podcast partner, Med Travelers. Med Travelers is an industry leader in allied travel career opportunities for a reason, featuring exclusive jobs at top-tier facilities across the United States, higher earning potential, W-2 employee status, and a flexible schedule. Med Travelers is your advocate for career success. Make sure to visit medtravelers.com to discover how Med Travelers can help drive your career forward. Again, go to medtravelers.com to start your travel journey today. And now back to the show.
And do you, as you kind of move through and once the students become more comfortable with a piece of literature, do you scaffold it? So maybe in the beginning, it's identifying on their core board. And then you may, if they're able to, you may move to answering questions about the reading or having them ask you a question about the reading. Do you scaffold just as you would if they were not using an AAC?
A lot of it is, yes. So a lot of things when I'm working with emergent communicators, then I will do a lot of that expectant pause. So especially if we're doing something with repetition with variety, like you were saying, they're starting to expect this phrase is coming or this word is coming because I've had practice with this and I know what's coming and I'm excited and I want to share it. So I may read, especially if it has a repeated line, I may read the first part of it and then just pause and just wait and see. Another strategy that's in this Comprehensive Literacy for All book is called the CAR, C-A-R, and it's comment, ask, and respond. So we as the reader would make a comment while we were reading the book, we would comment on it, and then we would ask the student what they thought or what do you think or a question like that and wait for a response. And then initially they may not give us a response and that's fine. Then we respond and we expand off of it or we respond with what we think they might have thought and kind of go that direction to kind of teach the students, this is kind of how we're going to work on this shared reading piece and that kind of a thing. So that CAR strategy, it's explained a lot better in this book, but that is definitely a strategy that I have had success with, and I know others have had success with as well, to kind of teach students, this is part of this communication piece, but also I really want to know what you're thinking. Like, it's okay to interrupt me when I'm reading and comment on something or tell me about, you want me to go faster or you want me to read that again or something like that. So it is a lot of scaffolding, but it's also making sure that you've got that wait time in there for them. But then also if they don't give you anything, to model something for your student, like something that they could have said, so that the next time, again, with that repetition with variety, they may remember that and they may pull that from their background knowledge and be able to use that.
Now, when you are modeling it, so that R piece, are you modeling it with their device? Okay, so you're finding.
So I would model. Yes, sorry. I would model on their device or on a core board in the classroom or what have you. In my classrooms, we do have big poster-sized core boards that I often will sit in front of when I'm reading and use a pointer or use my finger to model as I'm reading, which I can also do. But if you don't have access to that, absolutely modeling on, or if your student's using a specific system that's not the same as your classroom core board, modeling on their system and definitely demonstrating to them where they can find that vocabulary on their system is definitely important.
Yeah, and I'm sure them hearing it, them seeing it, that tactile piece, the more we can use all of our senses, it just helps it to stick. And then just that consistency and voila, it's just piece of cake, right?
Right, it is. It is. You really have to go into those shared reading opportunities with no expectations, right? So you can plan ahead and have ideas of the different core words that you want to use, like we were talking about on the sticky notes, but also knowing that it may completely take a left turn.
Yeah.
And what you thought you might be talking about something completely different, but that doesn't mean that activity wasn't a success. It very well could have been even more of a success at that point. So that flexibility piece is important as well.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember too, that just like you said, even though the first time it was a bust, doesn't mean never do it again.
Exactly.
Oftentimes there's a variety of reasons it could have been a bust. So don't give up, because then it could be one of their favorites at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if you've got students that initially have zero interest in books, and I mean, we've all seen these toddlers too, that are just like flip, 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 like really, really fast through the pages. And then you can just be saying, oh, turn the page, turn it again. Oh, let's read it again.
Mm-hmm.
So you can still incorporate different literacy strategies and different core vocabulary. And when I say core vocabulary and literacy, you really can't pull them apart. I mean, right? Because they're so intertwined that it's almost like to have one, you've got to have the other. So I guess I kind of use them a little bit interchangeably, which I guess is why I have my website called Sensible Literacy, because it just, in my brain, they're just very much intertwined.
Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense, because that's what when you're learning literacy, you can't help but also learn vocabulary. They just, like you said, they go hand in hand. So,
yeah.
Now, what are some other activities that you like to do to incorporate literacy in AAC? What are some of your other favorites? I love the idea of the Post-it notes.
Mm-hmm. Like I was saying, I will usually have an extension activity afterwards that pulls from the story. So I have one of my favorite books is I'm a Dirty Dinosaur, and it's a dinosaur that gets dirty and he jumps in the mud and he gets all dirty and he shakes it all around. And then he jumps in water and he's all clean. And there's tons of core vocabulary and there's tons of stuff to talk about in the pictures. But then what I'll do with my students is I'll bring in a tub and some chocolate pudding, maybe pre-made, maybe made with the students as part of the activity. And then some little plastic dinosaurs, and they drop the dinosaurs into the chocolate pudding to make them muddy or dirty. And they get to push them in, so that brings in a sensory piece. And then at the end, after everybody's put their dinosaur in, then I have a separate tub that's full of water, and they can pull them out and put them in the water, and then he's all clean, just like the story. So I like pulling in sensory activities like that. It could also be something as simple as going on a letter walk around your building or around your classroom. If you don't want to leave your classroom, go on a letter walk around your classroom, whether it's letters that are up already in your classroom or words that are up already in your classroom, or if you strategically put some letters up, you can go around and look for those throughout the day. Let's see, I'm trying to think of other things that we've done. We have to incorporate another sensory piece and some fine motor and literacy stuff, is we would take Ziploc bags and fill them with hair gel and then seal them off. And then the students were able to write their letters in that, or write them in sand, or use shaving cream. Oh my gosh, my kids love using shaving cream to write with and just play around and scribble with. So we do a lot of different multi-sensory things to really pull in all those different pieces for our students.
Well, I also love the shaving cream activities. So, I mean, and I think you're right. It's like, those are where they really learn, because it's not targeted as learning, but it's fun. It's play. They're getting to physically do things. And I think that's where things really stick and become more motivating.
Absolutely. It definitely helps with that comprehension and that retainment piece.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, how do you address literacy? Let's say a student is a certain age, but the cognitive level is below that. Do you work at kind of level of functioning, or try to incorporate things that feel more age appropriate? How do you do that with literacy?
That was a question that I had a long time when I was initially starting to work with them. And actually, again, this book, I keep talking about it, but I'm telling you guys, if you are interested, check this book out, because the authors, Dr. Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver, actually listed it out. So there is emergent literacy and there is conventional literacy. So that's kind of more of what you need to look at for your students. And they have it broken down so you know whether your student would fit more in the emergent category versus the conventional. Whereas conventional is what we were taught in school or what is still being taught. So you're talking alphabetic knowledge, you're talking phonological awareness, independent reading, comprehension, that kind of a thing. But there's also the emergent that happens before that. So I'll read this. There's 4 different sections. There's 4 different questions that you need to answer to find out if your student fits in emergent or if they fit in conventional literacy. And there's also a graphic. I can send you a graphic too that shows it really well in a flow chart that we could put in the show notes if it would work. But you have to know if the student identifies most letters of the alphabet most of the time, if they're interested and engaged during shared reading, if they have a means of communication and interaction, and if they understand that print has meaning. So if you can say yes to all 4 of those, then you need to start with conventional literacy. If you even have one no, which a lot of the times for my students, it's that means of communication and interaction, then you start with emergent. And then once you can say all yeses to all of those, then you can move fully into conventional literacy. And I won't go too far into it, but you can also merge the 2 as you're making that bridge. But that's more of, rather than looking at like any kind of testing or assessments or anything like that, answering those 4 questions is going to give you a better understanding of where you need to start and where you need to focus. And then knowing if you're going to be in the emergent camp or the conventional camp, then you can really finesse it and fine tune down to what areas you really need to focus on to help get them to that conventional stage.
Yeah. And that's great because you're meeting them where they are at. Because I imagine there's been many times, I'm sure I've been guilty of this too, where we are going well above where they're at. And then we're wondering, why aren't they making any progress? Why are they frustrated? Why this? Why that? So I love that gives you just that really concrete, if you can answer this, you need to move to this. I wish everything in life was. Can I just have one of those for every single thing in life?
I know. It would make decision making a lot easier.
Yes, I know. But that is great. So then it also probably helps take off some of that pressure of, okay, well, they're 11. I need to be doing things that are only, but again, instead of focusing on age, it's on where are they at?
Right. And what are their interests?
Yes.
Because even if they're 11 or they're 15 and they really like a certain, music artist.
Yeah.
Well, you can still find emergent reading materials or create your own emergent reading materials or activities where, the music person that they like is going on the literacy walk with them and is walking through and trying to find the letters with them, or you're listening to their music and trying to hear certain things. So there's definitely ways to pull in age respectful and their interests, regardless of whether they are emergent or a conventional literacy learner.
Yeah, and that's great to keep in mind. Your SLPs are very good at that. We can make things more difficult, less difficult, but still using the same subject. So I think that's great to hear. Now, when you are working with AAC, and I know we talked a little bit about goals in the last episode, but do you write specific literacy goals, or is it just a given that you're going to incorporate those into what you're doing?
It is a given, but I will sometimes incorporate some things as far as spelling because especially for my high tech users and actually for my light tech users as well, because all of my light tech users have a QWERTY keyboard accessible to them as well. And we demonstrate spelling for them or letter identification. So there are times where I will write a spelling as part of their multimodal goal. So I know in the last episode, we talked about multimodal communication and how that's a big part of my goals. Sometimes I take that for granted and I just assume that spelling piece is part of the multimodal, just like when we're texting and what have you. But there are certain times where I will call that out specifically if that's something we are working on specifically with a student. But oftentimes I just incorporate it within the multimodal piece.
Okay. So it's just kind of not necessarily spelled out exactly, we will do this, but it's incorporated into the goals so that it's if they do, it's almost accountability that it's going to be incorporated.
Exactly. Because a lot of the times what I find myself doing, and now thankfully that I've been doing it, I see some of the staff that I work with doing it, is if I can't think of where a word might be that I want to model for a student. Well, I have the search function typically on a communication device where I can look. But if I'm working with a device that I'm not familiar with, or I don't want to spend the time to go through the search function, or I'm on a light tech device and all I have is a QWERTY keyboard, then I can work with that keyboard or the keyboard on the device to say, I'm not sure where that word is. Let's spell it. Let's see if we can spell that word. And then we talk through, okay, it starts, for instance, this is kind of a silly example, but the word ball. If you didn't know where the word ball was, or your student didn't know where it was, then you could say, let's spell that. Let's see, what letter does that start with? B, b, and then talk through that and then find the B. And it's a little, I'm not going to lie, it's obviously going to take you a little bit longer, but you have to remember those important skills that you're teaching them along that route of communication breakdowns, literacy skills, communication skills, all of that can be incorporated in there. So that's how typically I do it. But it does make me think that I'm wondering, because I know that we talked in the last episode about me continuously thinking about goals and how to make them more comprehensive for my students. There are some goals similar to that in that DAG resource that I mentioned as well. But it makes me think that I wonder if I do need to spell that out, be a little bit more specific, and like list examples of multimodal in my goal. So I'm going to be thinking about that one.
Hey, every day we're learning. Every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All the time, even when I don't want to. It happens. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I also love that, because let's say they move to another school, then there's that accountability that somebody who maybe another clinician that maybe wasn't incorporating literacy the way that you are, but sees that and says, oh, this is something. So you just, that ripple effect, you never know.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you have any favorite just resources or apps that you would recommend for any SLPs that are addressing literacy in AAC?
Definitely resources. I've got 2 books, obviously this one, Comprehensive Literacy for All. And then this one, it's a little bit denser. It's called Practically Speaking. It's by Gloria Soto and Carol Zangari. Carol Zangari is the one who runs the awesome Practical AAC blog. She is phenomenal. So that's definitely a resource, is the Practical AAC blog. She's got lots of great blog articles written about emergent literacy as well as AAC. Project Core is another wonderful, it's project-core. And that's another resource that's wonderful for AAC as well as literacy. And Tar Heel Reader, which is Tar and HEEL because it's out of North Carolina. That is a wonderful website that you can go on where people have created books about, all sorts of things. And you can also go on and create your own books for your students, or with your students actually as well. Focusing in on specific topics or things that you're working on, or ABC books that are age respectful, and lots of things like that. The other thing that we use a lot at my school is just good old PowerPoint. And my pre-K students work through and they do a predictable writing chart. And when they finish it at the end of the week, they have everybody's picture with their sentence for the predictable writing chart, and they put it together in a book and they make it on PowerPoint. Super easy, print it out, laminate it, and it goes in their bookshelf at school. And the kids love reading the books that they have written about themselves. Book Creator is another one that I am not totally familiar with, but have played around with and know that it is really good. That's another app that can be used. I think it's only an iPad app I think you can use it on computer as well. But there's different apps that I can't remember. I think it's maybe Catchy ABC, where it's like a virtual reality. And it shows letters up in your environment, and then you go around with your phone and you catch them into the bubble. So there's just, there are so many different literacy websites and apps out there that it's more, again, it's kind of like AAC. It's regardless of which one you pick, it's more of how you implement it that is really going to be the make it or break it, and dependent upon how involved you get and how involved your students get in it.
Well, what I have figured, just from speaking with you, is there's no lack of resources out there. And there's probably, as much as you want to learn, there are resources out there for you. And I do love that you point out that there's not only books that you can get ideas from, but there's different apps, and then even just PowerPoint, which we all have
absolutely
access to. And that sounds like it's one of the more popular activities because, again, it's meaningful because it's about them and their classmates, and that consistency that they can go back and read it and reread it, and it's motivating to them. So I think those are all such great. It makes me think I could go back and do this, but no. but if I was starting out again, I feel like what you've done is made all of these things feel less intimidating.
Oh, good.
So,
good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, because just speaking personally for myself, I know there's times where it's like, oh no, I'm not going to do that because I don't know even where to begin. And it feels very intimidating, but you've helped me understand, no, it's like anything. You're going to break it down into small pieces, and it's not going to be a one and done. You're going to learn along with the student.
Absolutely. My students have taught me more things than I can even ever imagine.
Yeah, I know. I would say we learn more from them sometimes than they do from us. So
absolutely.
Well, Megan, I feel listen, we're all in a virtual world. My dog will sometimes, there's a reason I can't put my camera down anymore because my dog has destroyed her bed again and it's all over. But I appreciate your time and your knowledge. It has been so helpful, and we will list all of these resources because, again, you have given so many great resources and ideas, and also the link to your website, Sensible, S-E-N-S-E, Sensible Literacy. And we'll put that on there as well. And just thank you so much for your time, your expertise, your passion for what you do, and for really helping me, and I'm sure many people understand how important literacy can be, especially with groups that we didn't normally think we would really incorporate it much with. So I really do appreciate your time and expertise.
Absolutely. And if anyone ever wants to chat AAC and literacy, you can definitely find me on my website or on Facebook or Instagram at Sensible Literacy as well. And I'm happy to chat AAC and literacy anytime.
You're the best. Thanks, Megan.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for tuning into SLP Full Disclosure. For more information about this episode, check out the show notes on our website at medtravelers.com/SLP Full Disclosure. And don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss a guest. Are you interested in becoming a travel SLP? Visit medtravelers.com to learn more and explore the exciting opportunities we offer at top-level facilities across the country. Also, a special thanks to Jonathan Carey for producing this episode and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. And as always, this episode was powered by Med Travelers. See you next time.